fine-tune OpenAI models. And so it's very simple and straightforward. So very specifically, we're going to start with the OpenAI website. And then you should be familiar with this. And then once you log in, you get to either ChatGPT or API. And then in this instance, we're going to go over to API. And then from here, you've got a bunch of different options on the left-hand side. And then so you can see like get started and then capabilities and other things. The thing that we want to focus on in this instance is under capabilities, and then we're going to go to fine tuning. And then so there's lots of different options. We just click here, fine tuning. And then from here, there's a bunch of documentation with regards towards fine tuning. And then, I mean, this is kind of the meat and bones of the fine tuning process. And then so all of this documentation is a part of the OpenAI cookbook. And then so like if you're looking for documentation guidance, the OpenAI cookbook is the best place that you'll find, the best resource that you'll find for any of these things. But going through here, you can see here, they go in depth and they give you everything. And then so first thing to highlight up front is so as of the making of this video, which is the end of March 2024, fine-tuning for GPT-4 is in an experimental access program. Eligible users can request access in the fine-tuning UI, creating a new fine-tuning job. So you can fine-tune GPT-4, but you have to like very specifically request access to be able to. If not, then for most users, you're restricted to GPT 3.5, Babbage, or DaVinci. And then so I assume that most people are interested in fine-tuning GPT 3.5. And then within that, you've got different versions of the 3.5 model. And then there are like slightly different costs and the cost structure, but it's generally minimal for 3.5 overall. But just throwing it out, there are cost considerations and cost differences between the three models, which is kind of why they do that, right? And then so within this, the other thing to go into before the preparing the data set, I think, is that how big of your data set size should you utilize. So if you go further in this document, they give you examples, and I'll just tell you up front. Essentially, what they recommend up front is 50 to 100 rows of data. And then so 50 to 100 rows, and then that gets us into essentially how to format that. And then you have to follow, with all fine-tuning methods, you're going to have to follow their formatting very specifically. And then almost every model that you'll deal with is going to be some variation of like prompt and response, right? And then they'll call it different things, but it's always going to be like generally that same thing. In this instance, it's prompt, text, and completion is what they call it for the prompt and completion. And you can notice it's like lowercase, right? So all lowercase prompt, all underscore text, all lowercase text, all lowercase completion, and it needs to be like all lowercase, right? Like if it's uppercase C or uppercase P, it's going to reject it. And then so that's up front number one. Number two is getting it into this format, right? And then so I'll tell you, like I'll show you very specifically how I get, this is JSON-L format. So if you're not familiar with it, which is JSON lines, which is very similar to JSON format, which is, if you're not familiar with JSON overall, it's like the different like brackets act as like separators, and then so it's essentially like a separator system. And then so you'll notice that separators are very important within this language. So the brackets, the commas, the colons, etc. All of these are what makes up the language. And then so having these in the correct order and the correct sequence, and knowing that you, for example, to put 3 at the end, etc., can make a big difference. And then other thing to highlight here too, before we dive specifically into how to create these examples, is that you'll notice that there's 2 different examples here too, right? 2 different types of examples. And then so you'll notice when you first go in here, you might want to go with a simpler one, just this prompt and completion. But you'll notice here very specifically on the text that this like very simple format, it's only for, in this instance, the Babbage O2 model and the DaVinci O2 model. So like the old models and very simplistic models. And so very old and simplistic models, which gives you the old and simplistic method. And And then so if you want to like actually utilize like GPT 3.5 or anything like that, you're gonna have to utilize the more complex method, which is not actually more complex when you actually look at it and understand it. And I can make it really simple and easy for you here, right? So I'll utilize and show you a real example that I utilized for training overall. And then so just did this as a recent training of the model. And then so I start here, and then with my spreadsheet, it's exactly what you would expect, right? Prompt and completion, exactly what they're calling for within this. And then so I build out the prompt and responses, and then I built out, I think in this instance, about 80 or so. Yeah, about 78. And then so then I essentially, you can just go right over here to ChatGPT 3.5 in this instance, utilizing the same model that we're going to train, right? And then give it the data, and then have it convert it specifically to JSON-L. And then I give it about like 5-6 lines at a time, like 5 to 7 lines at a time, and just let it go. And it'll convert over to JSON-L. And then in this instance, I'm using Sublime Text because I'm on a Mac. I'm using Mac for it in this instance. And then so here's all of my messages, and then here they are all on one JSON-L line. And then with JSON-L, one thing to highlight is that you don't want any sort of commas or anything at the end. These brackets act as the separators. So, and then you want just one data line is one line. So, but other than that, it's a pretty straightforward language and pretty simple to use. And then so once you've got all of your data into your data set, so in this instance, I'm using a text editor, and then I just save it as .jsonl. That's the only this. So if I just saved it as a normal file, it would save it as a text file, and then just naming it .jsonl in this instance saves it as a JSON-L file. That's how your typical text editor works if you're not aware on that. And then so coming back to our fine-tuning job here, we go back here essentially to our to the fine-tuning link here. And then when we actually want to like get started with our model, and then on the left-hand side, we go over here to the actual fine-tuning, and then we can click on it. And then in here, it's going to show you your models. So the model that we've been looking at, I trained it last night. And then so we just go here and then create. And then this menu here is really straightforward, right? So you just pick the base model, and then in this instance, the version of the GPT instance that you want, and then you can fine-tune, again, your fine-tuned model if for any reason that you'd want to. That's available for you as an option as well. And then for your training set, you just upload the training set, or you select your existing training set, and then so our JSON file, JSON-L file, we would just select that. And then when we click upload and select, my suffix gives you essentially the name of the model, and then what you want to serve as a data validation. So if you have a data validation file, then you can upload that. Highlighting that OpenAI does not charge for validation for model training. So if you want to spend the time in creating that validation data and then uploading it, there's no charge to you. Like that's what like they want to incentivize you to validate your data. And then so leaving this the most important thing, which is about like how much does it cost for this training set, that this example that we've been going over in this video. It's about $2 to $3. That's it, right? And so I think like to a lot of people that's they probably think it's a lot more. Nope, that's about it. About $2 to $3 every single time they want to do this. And then that does add up, right? Because you can do this lots of different times. You can do this 20 times in a day, and then then you're talking about like a little bit more money. And then so and then the big thing is the inference cost, right? And then so that's where the real money comes in. Like it's not expensive overall to train these models, and then the training process is getting easier and easier overall for the average person to do. For anyone to be able to train these models, it's kind of the goal. It's just driving towards the efficiency of that, and it's getting really easy at this point. But the major cost is again like once you've trained it, then inferring the model, having other people utilize the model, and then utilizing the API calls from the model, and that's what's going to drive up your costs really quickly. And then when you see people with like huge OpenAI bills, that's always what it is. Not in the training. Trainings, they essentially, it's you can utilize it. You can train your model for really cheap and get on the platform for really cheap, and then it's the inference from there. So just throwing that out there. But so yeah, this gives you a really simple tutorial as to fine tuning and training a open AI model. And then so again, very specifically, this is going over GPT 3.5, which is as of this particular making of this video, is your main option available. Thank you very much.